Today we're going to look at a really important line in the Tartakower defense, one of White's most aggressive setups, and if you don't know what you're doing, you can totally get smashed off the board in a hurry. So let's jump in. So we get a normal looking Caro-Kann, and we jump into this Tartakower defense, which we love so much. It's like one of my favorite lines, except for what we're going to see here. Everything going quite normally until we get to this point where we play rook e8. And this is, we have a bit of a branch point where White can choose to do something quite dangerous. So before I played this game earlier against my coach, I had played a game that went like this. We went queen c2, and we play h5, which is normal, and castles, and we go h4. And we've sort of trapped this knight so it can't reach here, which means it can't get to this square. Everything's looking great. But this is where things start to get kind of complicated. Bishop to d2, which is not as common as bishop to e3, but the bishop actually really belongs on d2. It doesn't want to block this e-file. So I haplessly went along like normal, and rook ad1, and I'm like, what is going on? This is like, I've not really ever seen anyone play this way, but it turns out this is super dangerous, and I just made the most normal move, and I'm already worse. And the point is that, like, c4 comes, just grabbing space. I didn't really see the point or what the problem was, so I played queen d7, and he smacks me with f4. And now I'm like, ugh, I don't know what's happening. Like, this looks terrifying because we're about to get completely shoved off the board. Actually, f5 is the best move here because I've already led myself into some issues. The computer doesn't think it's a problem, but man, this is uncomfortable. In the game, I played c7, and he went here, and then f5, and after bishop d5, just knight c3. And like the computer eval already shows this as like a -3, even though the material is completely dead even. So I had this idea in mind when I played this game, and here my opponent castled, which actually lets us off the hook in a big way. So I played knight d7, and now f4 struck, and I couldn't quite remember the line that I just showed you guys. But like I was aware that last time f4 happened, this was not good, and I needed to do something different than I normally do. So I played queen c7, which actually is not the most critical idea. My point is that I needed to stop f5, which stopping f5 is really, really important. We really can't let this pawn get here. But instead of queen to c7, there's a much, 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 much better way. The computer actually likes to play f5, just sacrificing a pawn, putting a knight here, and suggesting that we have great compensation for it. But I think there's a much, much more natural way to play this. And it's not an idea that we often see in the Tartakower. Typically, we're looking at ideas like this, and we have our bishops up, and we're just sort of doing a direct piece assault. Or even sometimes we're shuffling these pawns up the board for an attack. It's not very often that we revert back to sort of a traditional Caro-Kann idea and play c5, which is like one of the most natural breaks in the position. It's just not one that comes up a lot in the Tartakower. And the point is that we're striking at the center because the king is a little bit open, and we're trying to get access to this diagonal, which is a really important concept because this f4 pawn definitely weakens his king a bunch. So I looked at a bunch of different lines here. d5 is probably the most challenging one because here we do sacrifice the pawn. We're giving White the opportunity to grab this guy, but we're going to get access to the c5 square. We get this nice b6 square. So it might go something like bishop takes c4, knight to b6, bishop to d3 coming back. It's really important that the bishop comes back to d3 because if he does something sort of natural like here, intending to play like this and attack our f7 pawn, well, there's already a lights out situation. Just bishop g4, and this knight is under tremendous pressure. We're going to have huge problems. Tries to defend it, we give it check. Now the king has to make this really, really awkward move because otherwise the knight just falls. If you try to play back this way, then we just have this check, and this is a big problem. So king f1 happens. Now we can play the queen out, and we're just prepared to create all kinds of havoc and create problems here because this king is really, really awkward. So this is why the bishop really needed to stay on the d3 square. So if we look at that line instead, where they go bishop to d3, well, now we can just grab this pawn. They do have a tactic, though. They hit us with this check, we grab, and they grab this guy. But we're really not concerned about this. We're going to play queen to b6 check. We're going to play bishop out to e3. We have a wide open board, a kind of exposed white king. We have a bishop pair. We have tremendous compensation for this pawn, which is just an h pawn. we're actually doing quite a bit better, especially, this queen's on b6. It makes this guy hard to develop. We've got good pressure against this knight. The queen's getting kicked around. We have open files for our rook. We have a tremendous lead in development. This is definitely okay for us to play. But if we go back, white didn't have to swing past us. They could also capture the pawn. And this is even better for us. Even like head over heels better for us. Because now we grab with the knight, not the bishop. It's pretty natural to grab with the bishop because it's a check. But this knight's actually not in the greatest square. We would really like to be able to develop our bishop out somewhere. So we take with the knight instead. And now this knight drops in. It was feeling pretty awkward here, uncomfortable. Ideas like bishop b4 coming. And so queen c7. Now we're just adding additional pressure against this pawn, and we're just developing quickly. So bishop c2, just getting out of the way. White doesn't want to hand us the bishop pair for nothing. And we can do something like this. And we're just bringing in our pieces nice and easy. We get knight to e6. We're preparing to take this guy, try to create an isolated pawn, again, with ideas on this diagonal. So say knight to f5, not a big deal. Now we give the check. The king goes to sneak out of the way. And now look at these bishops. These bishops look amazing. And, play can continue like rook f3, just trying to continue on with an attack. But now after bishop to c6, just coming back, rook to g3, we still have a fantastic position. I don't think we have anything to worry about here. We can just play g6, kick this guy out of the way, and we're clearly happy having these files for our rooks. We've got these amazing diagonals for our bishop. Look at all these arrows. We've got arrows all over the board, even material, and I think that we're definitely for choice here. So this is really the way to strike back against this early f4, is this immediate counterattack in the center, and white will never have time to get anywhere off the board like we did in this game. So instead, I played queen to c7, and still, after g3, my point was I'm trying to stop f5, because I remembered from that previous game, that line I showed you before, that I really can't allow f5 to happen on the board. And I understood that I needed to play aggressive and to try to quickly create some sort of counterplay. Otherwise, that c4 and f5 were going to happen, and I was just going to get smashed. But I didn't go about this in the best way. c5, definitely. Even here in this position, c5 is still really strong. In fact, it's even stronger than it was a move ago. This g3 move is pretty slow, and you can see that the engine actually just says, play this anyway. Play f5 anyway. Because when this pawn gets to f5, well, you're going to see what happens when the pawn gets to f5. It's not good. It ain't pretty at all. I mean, even at the cost of this sacrifice, letting this pawn get to f5 is still really strong. So instead of, I can play c5 here, like I said, and, queen c2, trying to attack this guy, we don't really care. Now we can play f5. It's a pawn sacrifice. Earlier, we alluded to the idea that this pawn sacrifice is strong, and here it's like mandatory. We really need to do this. Other ideas don't work quite as well. We can capture if we want. It doesn't really help. I mean, the knight's just going to grab, or actually we can give a check, and this is not the greatest. I mean, this is okay, but f5 is a really nice idea. And the point is that we're going to give up this pawn. It was already a doubled, kind of an ugly pawn, but we get knight to f6. Sure, you can take our bishop, but now we bring this rook in, and we're just speedily developing. Our two minor pieces, definitely better than white's two minor pieces. Our rooks, definitely better than their rooks. And white's attack is just not really there. Say queen to d3, trying to get out of the way of this file. And we're doing quite well. We can still now have ideas like h5, h4, and white, we don't actually want to be the ones to take here immediately. We would much prefer that white took. This pawn is doing a good job of blocking this knight from making further advances. Look at this. This knight's totally hemmed in, which this kind of idea of how white's pieces are all sort of stumbling over their own pawns is why we can get away with this f5 pawn sacrifice, and why we're actually happy to give away our light squared bishop. So again, we went back. I missed the second opportunity to play f5. You guys won't miss this because you get to see my misery and my losses, and now you get to learn from it and not do it yourself. So white gets f5 in. And again, c5 is like the only way to try to continue here. I didn't do that. I played h4, thinking that this battery that I have here is impressive, but actually this h4 trying to attack here is a lights out situation. The game is just over. Knight f4 is a fantastic looking move. It doesn't look good. I didn't really expect it, But I did start to appreciate that, oh, wait, maybe this is a problem. I don't want to take it. I mean, we could, but then, the rook takes, and, so what? We take this guy, big deal. He's going to completely ignore it and just checkmate us over here. Completely ignore it. We have no mobility. This bishop plus this pawn, meaning that we can never try to advance and gain any space over here. What good is this knight going to do for us? It's just going to hem us in further. We're going to get mated on the h8 square. So that's really no good at all. I mean, if I just take it and then try to play bishop to b6, well, doesn't matter. The queen still just comes to h file. And if we ever try to capture here, big problems. White can even choose to take this way and bring the rook over here. All kinds of issues. So after f4, I started to really realize the danger of this pawn on f5. Even though I'm not completely out of space like I was before, this knight's still really awkward, and now I try to play c5. But this is kind of like one of those too little too late type situations. I mean, I had like 3 or 4 opportunities to try to get something going with c5 earlier in the game, and I chose not to do it. So queen to g4 happens, bishop f8. What else am I going to do? Knight h5 and just checkmate right here, right? Well, knight h5 happens anyway. I went ahead and grabbed this pawn. At this point, it doesn't really matter. He took back. Didn't actually have to. He could have played the sort of the killer blow that happened in the game anyway. I took here, and now knight takes g7. Brilliant move. Really, really nice idea from my opponent. The point is that, okay, fine, I can take it, but then bishop h6 comes, and this is just a lights out situation. They're getting the piece back. I'm getting mated. My king is going to do the walk of shame out to the center of the board, if I'm lucky enough to get my king to the center of the board. So, again, going back, this idea of this f4 push, which is a really aggressive attention. The idea is to put this pawn on f5, freeze our entire king side, and then just come piling in with the pieces is really, really, really dangerous. And we need to react in a hurry. So after this f4, again, go back immediately with the c5 and just crack open these lines. Take advantage of the fact that this diagonal has been weakened and that this knight's somewhat still awkwardly placed. And don't be afraid to drop a pawn or two for piece activity, because white's pawns are going to be a little bit awkward and we can get some pressure against them. Anyhow, I hope this was helpful and you guys enjoy watching me suffer and continue to lose and put my painful losses out on YouTube for you guys. As always, leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you. And you'll find a link to a PGN in the game with more analysis and even more lines, everything all written out. And thanks a lot. We'll see you around. Bye-bye, guys.